Welcome to the Greater Culture Podcast, where we have conversations about how to elevate the quality of life through movement, nutrition, recovery, and mindset practices.
Welcome to another episode of the Greater Culture Podcast. Your host, Brad Marshall. Today, excited to be joined by a friend, colleague, Megan Schlobohm. She is the owner of Anderson Yoga Center in South Carolina, and we actually crossed paths at a yoga retreat, which was super fun and an amazing experience in Costa Rica that I'm sure we'll dive into. But Megan, thanks so much for spending some time chatting with me today.
Yes, absolutely. I'm super happy to be here.
So you are the owner of Anderson Yoga Center, and I know from our conversations, you have a very fun past that led you to that point in time. It's always fascinating to hear how small business owners have found their way into owning a gym, a studio, whatever it might be. So tell us a little bit about your story and how did you come to find yourself as not just a yoga instructor, but then eventually owning your own studio?
Yeah, it is a very interesting story for sure. So I began practicing yoga when I was 18. I was just out of high school and getting into college, and I was just stressed beyond words. I didn't have really a way to describe how I was feeling. It was in my body. It just was overwhelming, honestly. It was anxiety and depression that I could say now, but I just didn't even have words for it when I was going through it. So I started practicing yoga when I was 18. I got invited to do a yoga class to participate in a yoga class. And I cried in pigeon pose and I fell asleep in Shavasana and I came to and I'm like, what was that? And I pretty much from that moment onward just wanted to do yoga. I wanted to go anywhere that I could do yoga. I'm from the Atlanta area, and interestingly, this is 20 plus years ago now. There were no yoga studios, so it was only pop up yoga here and there. I remember scouring like the newspaper, and this is predating me right now, but I remember scouring the newspaper and different like schedules for schools and even the Veterans Association, the library, anywhere I could do yoga, I would just go do the yoga. So I just did yoga wherever I could. I never had a home studio. And then I was traveling for a while after I met my husband. He and I both worked together in the charter yacht industry. I was a chef, and my husband is a captain to drive very big, pretty, luxurious boats. And we did luxury vacations for people. And we did that for 10 years together, just about 10 years. But again, like I just found myself going to any yoga class that I could. I took yoga in all kinds of languages and cultures and environments, including the hottest, most sweaty gym that you can in the middle of the Caribbean. Just wherever I could do yoga, I would do yoga. And I've been lifting weights for at this point 15 years. So I did some weightlifting and then I would do yoga as supplemental to my weightlifting. And then my husband and his very, very Ernie is his name, or very Ernie fashion, one day was like, I'm done with the yachting industry. We're leaving. I was like, okay. So we owned the boat at the time, so we had to sell it. And we did quickly, very much quicker than we expected to. It usually takes about 3 years to sell a big business like that. And we sold it in 3 months. It was right timing, right everything. So in 3 months' time, we were like, what are we doing? I don't know. We moved back home to be near my mom and dad, not in the Atlanta area, but at this time in the country, in where Elberton, Georgia, which is on Lake Hartwell and Lake Russell, kind of in between the two. Um, and then again, I found myself doing yoga just anywhere that I could find yoga. And at this point, I literally still had never had a home studio. I just showed up wherever the yoga was. I didn't care what style it was. I didn't care the temperature. I didn't care the teacher. I just wanted to make sure I could actually show up. What time did it start? So that's all that I cared about when it came to doing the yoga. And so I just found myself doing yoga at the library in Hartwell because Hartwell was really, really close to Elberton area at that time. for me anyway. And I asked the instructor, how did you start this? How did you become a teacher? I want to do this. I think that this is something that I want to do. So I learned about trainings, which I had never heard about before. And I honestly didn't even do any research on it. I was just like, take me to the certification. I just want to do the process. I want to go through it. I want to learn more. I also kind of just want to learn over the years, like, what has all this voodoo been? What has this experience been? And learn the history of it and the science of it. So I went through my teacher training at a studio that had both locations in Anderson, where I now live, and Greenville, which is about like 30, 45 minutes away from me. But I went back and forth between Anderson and Greenville to finish my certification. And then I started teaching at the studio in Greenville, in Anderson. And then the owner of that studio kept talking about, I want to get out from underneath this. I don't want to be the owner of the studio anymore. I don't live in this town anymore. The commute from Greenville to Anderson is too much for me. So I just raised my hand and said, I'll take it. And it was pretty much from there that I bought the studio, and I eventually rebranded it. I changed it from the name that it used to be to Anderson Yoga Center, because it used to be just primarily hot yoga, and I knew that I wanted to do more than hot yoga. I think that really doing yoga everywhere in the world that I had served me well. Funny enough, not having a home studio had really served me well, because I had done so much different yoga, all different kinds and styles, and I everything. I just found the value in variety. And so I rebranded the studio for a different name, just Anderson Yoga Center. It was oriented, like I said, like towards just a hot yoga studio. And started offering different temperatures other than hot. And for us, hot yoga is about 105. And that's really inaccessible to a large group of people. And I I heard people say that I would do yoga butt. And I just didn't want that butt to be in there. I wanted there to be no butts. I wanted it to be, you can do yoga, and there's hot yoga and warm yoga and non-heated yoga. So that was just me for a couple of years, going through the process of being the owner of the studio, building the community, getting really clear about what was important to me, and then continuing education in the yoga field as well. So I went through another certification process for what is kind of known as the Advanced Yoga Teacher Certification Program. And I went, so funny. Here I am living in Atlanta, and I go to training in Greenville. And then when I live in Anderson, I go to training in Atlanta. So I drove back and forth from Anderson to Atlanta for 2 years, for like 17 weekends, something like that, to finish this advanced training. And then I had in mind that I wanted to do teacher trainings from there. So the certification that you need, I earned it. And then I started doing teacher trainings. And then enters our mutual friend, Jen, who I think has been on the podcast before, at least once. And Jen moved from North Carolina, where you are, to South Carolina, where I am. And just we didn't know each other. She reached out on this yoga studio owner's page, where we were both members but didn't know each other. And she said, "Does anyone live in Anderson?" And I immediately was like, "Can she see me? Like, who is this?" It's like immediately, like, nobody even knows that Anderson exists, let alone like asks about it. So who is this, and what does she want? And my intuition was, talk to her and don't be scared. And again, like, if something scares me, like we were talking about earlier, if something scares me, I do it. So I was a little scared at first. I was like, I don't know who this girl is. But we got on the phone and talked to each other, and immediately clicked. She was just a kindred spirit immediately. And she started teaching at my studio. And then we moved the studio to a bigger location so that I could have a giant heated room and a giant non-heated room, so that we could do teacher trainings and still have a regular schedule that it wasn't interrupted and everything. And Jen started teaching at the studio, and meanwhile, watching through social media and everything, people that I had trained with in Atlanta going on all these beautiful yoga retreats. And I had never been on a yoga retreat before. And I'm familiar with, the charter yacht industry and the luxury hospitality industry because of what I did. But I'm like, I want to do that. And I look into the pricing on it and I'm like, man, as a yoga studio owner, I just don't know if I can get there. Just, pricing is probably just going to be something that I can't even access. And I just sat in a really jealous state for a while. I watched all these people having a great time doing things that I wanted to do. And so I literally, like a Monday morning, I woke up and I was done. I was fed up. I called Jen. I was like, come do yoga retreats with me. She's like, say less. So we started researching and we found our first place to do a yoga retreat, which is where you and Emily got to come and enjoy in Costa Rica. And that was literally just on a whim where I was like, I'm done sitting on the sidelines. Again, like I don't sit on the sidelines very well. So I'm done sitting on the sidelines. If I want to do yoga retreats, this is how I'm going to have to get there. And so we have been doing retreats together for a couple of years now. And I've been the owner of the studio total for 8 years. We just had our full on 10-year anniversary. And 2 of those years I was not the owner. So 8 years for me. And yeah, at this point, we have a full schedule of classes at the studio here in Anderson, both heated and non-heated, and right in the middle, warm yoga. We have everything from really challenging power yoga to really, really gentle, slow yoga, yin yoga as well, meditation, pranayama, and breath work. And I do a lot of community reach out. So we have free classes that we do during our teacher training program. We have community classes that are offered for free at the park throughout the summer, which is actually one of my favorite things to do. It's quiet and it's beautiful, and doing yoga in nature is always really nice. And then I focus on the teacher training. I do one cohort a year. They just graduated a couple of weekends ago. And then I do as many yoga retreats as I can manage because those are the most fun for sure. No doubt. And you've been on one, so it is just so much fun. I love it. Yeah. That's a little bit of my story, how I got to be here today.
One of the things I love is just that there was a passion that you found early on, and even the winding and weaving road, eventually it kind of came back around of like, hey, this thing I really enjoy and love doing, is there a way to make it a
Yes.
career or make it part of my life? And the ability to enjoy it, learn more about it, seek it out to get the certifications necessary to become a yoga instructor, and then even learning how to own a business and add all the other things. Such a fun and cool story. I'm curious to know, what is it about yoga sort of in general that drew you to it? Because I think a lot of us have maybe stretched or been to classes,
Yeah.
done workouts and this and that, but yoga seems to have been the one for you that really called to you and spoke to you. So what is it about yoga that really drew you in and has sort of kept you in over the
Yeah,
years?
that is such a good question. And I think it goes back to the origins of why I started yoga. And it's, for me, largely mental health. It is such a mental health practice for me. And I've had conversations with my family about this before, like talking about going through the teacher training process and how it's not like innately, but it can be very emotional, very, very transformational. And a couple of family members have like stopped me and been like, why? I don't get it. Like, you're stretching. Isn't that what that is? Like, people don't have like these huge epiphanies when they're lifting weights and touching their toes. Like, why? And what I learned over many years of practicing, observing my own experience, and then studying was, and this is going to make so much sense as soon as you hear it, as soon as you learn it, it makes so much sense. Everything that we do in our whole life is through our body, which includes our mental health. It includes our emotions. It includes our interactions with other people. And it's as basic as stimulus and response. And when you think about like the fight or flight system, your body is designed to do that for survival. And these things that cause the stimulus that cause our body to have these different reactions, that's filtering through our body. So the emotion isn't just a thought, oh, I feel anxious, I feel angry. We're not just logically analyzing it, we are feeling it in our body. And that's what I didn't have words for when I was 18, feeling stressed out, anxious, depressed. Those things, I just didn't have words for it. I just literally felt in my body unwell. And so as soon as I started moving my body, there was this processing that my body was able to do. I know now that what that's called is completing the loop, completing the trauma loop. So if you have this stimulus that causes a response in your body to feel some way, whether it's real or perceived, you're experiencing this thing in your body. And if you don't deal with it, if you don't sit with it and observe it and figure it out, and even just as simple as acknowledging it, it's going to keep looping and it's going to keep coming up. And you could be out mowing the lawn
Mm.
and something happens to make you feel that way, and you're like, what is this? I'm nothing is I am not being chased by any bears. There's no danger here. Why am I feeling this way? Or whatever the feeling is that you have. So working with your body helps you process your mental health things. It helps you process all the things that you experience in your life. But interestingly, you have to have a pause in the middle, because you have to be willing, like I said, to sit with it. You have to be willing to acknowledge what you feel and be mindful of what you feel. So when you go into a yoga class at my studio anyway, and with my teachers, how I have trained them in my teacher training program, I remind my teachers that we're not just stretching, we're not just touching toes. It is not about just being able to accomplish a pose. We're helping people live, we're helping people process their life, basically. And slowing down and really being mindful is more important than accessing a certain pose or accomplishing something like a handstand or whatever it might be. Handstand is always the one that everybody goes to. I don't quite get that, but that's okay. But it's more about
Mhm.
the poses being an opportunity to observe. So that's what we really focus on at my studio. A lot of it is just a safe space for people to do their work, to do their transformational work, whatever that means, mental, emotional, spiritual, physical. But I really lean away from it being primarily physical, because the body's going to move. The body's going to get what it needs through the movement, through the breath, through just being there and going through the practice. Um, but we really focus on what else there is. We have a lot of women at the studio too, so I also focus on trauma sensitivity, which means that we are very cautious and careful of the people walking through the doors, making sure that we, if we can, avoid those triggers that might cause a stress response in somebody. For example, being cautious of language that we use around people. In a yoga class at my studio, we do not call out people's names. We wouldn't point anybody out. And we're also very hands off. So we don't do a lot of physical adjustments in a normal classroom environment. And yeah, just focusing on letting people have the safe space for transformation. And that's really what the magic of yoga is for me. And it has been such a transformational practice for me, making me slow down. I go way fast. I'm tripping over myself all the time, every day, all day. And it makes me slow down and it makes me be present and makes me be mindful. And once I do that, I can observe what's going on with me, what I'm experiencing, what I'm feeling. And instead of reacting, I can observe and choose. And if I don't want to react, then I don't. And it just gives a little space and time for processing. Yeah.
Yeah, that metaphor that you're using there is powerful, and one I've loved for
Yeah.
years as well. This idea of between stimulus and response is really our chance to choose how we want to be, how we want to show up, how we want to interact with ourselves and those around us. And the ability for yoga to give you that time and that space is something that's almost rare
I think
these
so.
days, because we are, from the time we wake up to the time we go to bed, schedules are packed, our days are filled, and taking an hour of putting technology away
Yes,
and breathing and moving and doing things that just allow you to sit and be, that's hard for
it really
people
is.
in this day and age.
It really is. And I know that you've been in lots of yoga.
And so I'm
Oh,
curious.
sorry. I think we have a lag here, but sorry. I I was
No,
just
go
gonna
ahead. Go
say,
ahead.
you've done
Yeah.
yoga, you've been in yoga
No.
classes. Shavasana is the last pose of a yoga practice, and Shavasana, for anybody who doesn't know, it means corpse pose, and you literally, for all intents and purposes, sorry to the beautiful ancient practice of yoga to dumb it down like this, but you just lay there. You really do. You extend your legs out long, you extend your arms out long, you close your eyes if you feel comfortable doing so, and you just lay there. And that is traditional to every style of yoga. I love that yoga says, okay, it doesn't matter if you chose power yoga to move your body or gentle yoga to move your body. The end point is to sit with yourself. Okay, stay there for a while, observe, and stay a little longer. Quiet your mind. And that's the hardest part for a lot of people, is just slowing down and getting quiet.
And what's really fascinating too is, as the teacher, being able to guide or help sort of facilitate that journey for people is the challenging part. And like you said, with the teacher training you get a chance to do is helping those instructors to understand, hey, yeah, you're leading a practice and you're guiding them through movements, but then there's this deeper inner
Yeah.
workings that are happening and that are unfolding, and that you can actually be really, really helpful for somebody to maybe unpack some of that, or be able to
Yes.
realize how they're feeling or what's going on that day. And so when you think about, from the teacher perspective, what are some of the things that are going through your mind that allow you to create a space and then allow you to guide people through it? Because it's one thing to go to a yoga studio, take a class, go for your hour and leave. It's another to get up in front of a group of 10, 15, 20 people and try and get them to have the similar or that type of experience that you're
Yeah,
explaining.
absolutely. It it's taken a long time, a lot of refinement for me to put my finger on what it is. And that's why I'm even though, like, my life, I'm kind of, like I said, like, I'm kind of tripping over myself constantly. I'm like, I'm halfway ahead of my own self half the time in my life, but it's taken a long time to really put my finger on it and be what it is. And it's a lot of slowing down. It really is. So in a yoga class with me at my studio, and how I train my yoga teachers, and we're very on the same page. We're very cohesive as a team of teachers. We're about 15 of us right now. And I've trained a little over half of them, I think, maybe even more than half. But anyway, we're very cohesive as a team. We always start with just slowing down. We start with getting what we call grounded and centered. So we begin a practice by, first of all, setting the tone. It is a quiet, technology free environment. The lights are low. It smells nice because there's usually essential oils or the remnants of incense from there. There's really nice music playing, so it's a really calming environment. And then we start well, basically, we start in Shavasana or some sort of seated meditation posture to drop in and become present. So if I were to just start a yoga class and I'm like, okay, everybody, inhale your arms up, exhale, forward fold, they haven't tuned in yet. So we get them to tune in first by using evocative language. Notice your body, observe the feeling of your body laying against the floor, observe the air on your skin, observe any feeling, any sense that comes to you. And that will help them anchor in the present moment to become more present. And then we move into the breath. The breath is another layer of consciousness and awareness, body being the first one. And this is literally just following yogic texts, going from the outer layer of ourselves to our innermost energetic spiritual layers. So the breath becomes the bridge between the outer and the inner. listening to your breath, observing that you have control over your breath, slowing the breath down, long inhales through the nose, exhaling out of the nose. And by the way, a lot of this is also science, and which I love that yoga today has been proven, if you will, to be like legit. I don't sound unintelligent right now, but like it's legit. And science has proven that yoga isn't just woo woo stuff, and it's legitimately working. So then more and more presence. Notice your thoughts, notice your emotions. But instead of over identifying with those thoughts and emotions, be the witness, be the observer of it. Allow them to almost even be like a separate entity to you. I like to sometimes give guided imagery like, imagine that your thoughts and your emotions are like clouds floating in the sky. And you observe that cloud, you observe that thought, you observe that emotion, but you're not holding on to the cloud. You let the cloud drift beyond the horizon. And maybe there's another cloud that comes up. Maybe that cloud tries to come back, but eventually your sky becomes a little clearer and you can focus on your breath and your body and the things that are truly rooted in the present moment. That's the problem with thoughts and emotions. Love them. They're great, but they can drag you back in time. They can drag you forward in time, and then you're not here. So it's really about helping them become more present. And then I like to add a theme or a message or an intention to a yoga practice that I'm guiding. And sometimes I leave it open ended for someone to incorporate whatever they need for the day. And sometimes I have something very specific. And sometimes even I have a specific intention that I've written an entire flow around, like a character in a yogic story, or, maybe we're doing something about being free and flying like a bird, and we decide to do a specific pose that's named after a bird like crow or bird of paradise, something like that. But intentionality and presence is really what makes a difference between a yoga practice, that mindfulness, that awareness, and just stretching or just doing anything really. I know a lot of people, and I don't want to discount anything that anybody does for their practice of mindfulness or presence. I am not, if there's one thing that I try to teach my yoga teacher training students, I am not the gatekeeper of yoga. If you decide that running your marathon is your practice of yoga because it brings you to a place of presence and clarity, you run that marathon. I'm not the gatekeeper for it. And so it's about dropping in and being really, really present. And that's where it gets uncomfortable, because as you were talking about, like, technology is constantly distracting us, and it's way easier, so much easier to just pick up your phone and mindlessly scroll than it is to acknowledge a feeling of discomfort in you from whatever source it might be. So and that's what I focus on in teacher training program: presence and grounding and centering more than anything. And then the yoga is the yoga. You can do any kind of flow that you want to do. You can, depending on the style of the yoga, the temperature of the yoga. Reading the room is really important. So if you're doing a power yoga class and everybody is just a puddle on the floor, maybe dial it down a little bit. There's some reading that happens with your students and the energy of the room. But otherwise, we start with our mindfulness, and then shavasana, we end with our mindfulness. And I always encourage my students to take that mindfulness, that awareness, that presence off their mat, and maybe even take a specific intention off their mat as well. So yeah, that's kind of how we build it in, is just beginning and ending with presence. And I tune in with them throughout the whole class as well. Instead of it being just, a warrior two or a lunge or you're in crow pose, yay. It's not crow pose for the purpose of crow pose. It's crow pose or whatever pose for the purpose of observing your reaction to the pose. Are you able to do it? How do you feel about being able to do it? Are you unable? How do you feel about being unable? And so I sprinkle that in too in the middle of class. Like, it's not just about the pose. Observe how you feel right now in this pose. Don't try to get through it. Don't try and think about, what you're going to make for dinner to get through it. Just sit with it. And that can be the hardest part for a lot of people, but we find a way to get it in there. And without being like, sit with yourself.
One of the things I love, and it's such a nuance of an instructor, coach in any realm, but having intentionality of what you want to be, how you want to embody as a leader for that class, and then creating the space and the environment for that is so, so powerful. And the other thing that you said there that jumps up into my mind is I saw somebody making a comment about this the other day about, fitness coaches and trainers and all of this and that. And he said, if we can help the stories in people's
Mm,
head, that might be even more beneficial and powerful than just improving their overall health and movement and strength. And what you just said there spoke to me around that idea of we're getting people the chance to be with themselves, to be present, to notice what's going on, and potentially giving them the moment to change. Hey, I
absolutely.
don't really like when I react this way, or when discomfort comes up and I get really frustrated and angry. Well, now you're giving them space to actually do that and work through some of those stories in their heads. So as a trainer, as a teacher, like that can be such a cool experience. But it takes time. It takes, some moments and reps to get to that level as a teacher, to provide the space for somebody to be able to experience
Yes,
that.
it really does. And as the teacher, it's your job to hold that space. As the guide or the coach or the teacher, you are there to hold the space for them, meaning you're trained, you're prepared, you have been through the experience yourself, and you are ready to guide people. That safe space is showing up fully present for them. And then there's this transformational experience that potentially happens. But there has to be safe space first. They have to trust you. They have to, and oftentimes doesn't happen very quickly at all. Like sometimes years before someone is like, well, I don't understand why I hate Shavasana, or I don't understand why I can't meditate. And it will take years for them to finally be like, I don't understand this thing. And some people take a really long time to get there, and that's okay. But the moment that I hear somebody observing something about the yoga practice that is outside of just the proverbial touch your toes, I'm like, yes, there it is. And then because you've created the safe space for them and you can potentially have a conversation about what they experience, then you can help them integrate. Because there's a whole nother element to it, is integration. I mean, what are you going to do with it? You go to Shavasana, you get really uncomfortable, you go home and you get distracted again because you didn't like it. But integrating what you learned into your life and saying, oh, wow, it is actually beneficial to slow down. It is actually really challenging to slow down. For me, for example, if I have a hard time sleeping, I know I'm too busy. I know that I have had way too much noise in my life. I've been on my technology too much, probably. There's symptoms, and we just ignore them because it's a lot easier to just keep being busy than it is to deal with it. That's unfortunate, but it's true.
Yes. Yeah, I would 100% agree with that. And one of the things I've learned that I think has helped me as a coach with movement is the way that yoga teachers offer paths
Yeah.
and options of, hey, you might want to try this. You may want to do this. Maybe it feels good to do this, versus feeling so rigid and structured of like, it has to be done this way. Giving people that space and giving them opportunity to
Yes.
explore and see, like, is that better? Is that worse? What do we want to do with that? And then you're able to have some of those conversations with folks outside of just, here's how you can squat a little bit better or press a little bit
Absolutely.
better. You start to figure out, oh, why does my shoulder or my knee or my hip want to do this? And now I'm starting to learn, and I can be my own teacher, which to me is the
I
ideal
agree.
scenario, where it's like you've learned and are aware enough that you can make decisions that are skillful for
Yes,
yourself. And
absolutely.
we've helped you to get
Yes,
there.
and it takes a teacher who puts their ego aside and puts their agenda aside. And that's another thing that we focus on a lot at the studio, is that the people who show up for a yoga practice at our class, at our studio, any class that they show up for, it is not about the teacher. You might be friends with them, they might love you, they might prefer you even, but at the end of the day, we are a blank slate. We are just a guide, and we offer constant modifications, variations, and we lean away from language that is about accomplishing a pose. Because that is just not what it's about. And it's the same thing for working out. It's not about accomplishing something, it is about your own observation and growth. And people are only going to grow to the level that they want to grow and are capable of growing. And it's not my business. It's not any coaches or trainers or yoga teachers or whoever's business of where I think that they should go. It's their life. Let them live their life. And honestly, like even just saying that autonomy and agency over your life is something that a lot of people don't have because they're just spread so thin everywhere in their everyday lives, whether they're with a job or caretakers of somebody, older people or a child or whatever is going on in your life. And they just don't have that amount of autonomy. I'm not in yoga where I have been told to make a shape has never been meaningful to me. It's really when someone said, that this is your own experience. My voice as a teacher is just a guide. You are the expert of you. That I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't get that a lot in my life. I get to be empowered, and then it doesn't matter if I did it right. I did it. I showed up and I observed, and that's really what most matters most. Yeah.
Yeah, those common themes you mentioned there, the idea of autonomy
Yeah.
and agency, two huge factors for what folks would call motivation, or what gets people excited to want to get up and keep going. And you've probably had the same experience where people come in and they tell you, hey, this is like my 1 hour of the day where it's like it's about me, or it's my time, whether it's mental health, physical health, etc. And you're grateful for that and you're excited about that. And then you're like, well, how do we create more of that in your
Yes.
life, where it's like you don't need just this hour of time for your class or in the gym to like experience some of those things. And I think that's what's sort of like what we're searching for as trainers and coaches and teachers.
Exactly. I agree completely. And it's challenge and I agree that it is also challenging because I never assume that I know what's going on in someone's life. I don't know what their home is like. I don't know what their job is like. I don't know what their history, their upbringing. I don't know what they've been through. And I just assume that this is the one precious hour of their day that is only for them. That's why we try really hard at the studio to make it a technology free environment. So we encourage people, definitely if you can leave your phone in the lobby, but I mean, the watches, oh my gosh, the technology of like the watches and the
Mm,
tracking and the biometrics. I'm just like, what if you didn't? It doesn't mean it didn't happen. People are just so stuck with it. So we try and give people, if nothing else, just a time for themselves that is precious and sacred. And
mhm.
that's, if nothing else, that's a huge piece of my job as a yoga teacher. And my teachers at the studio know this as well, is that it might be the only hour of their whole day for themselves, which is so sad. But if it's true, okay, we provided the space for 1 hour. That I'll take the win.
Yeah. And that gets me to think, and I'd love for you to speak on the idea of some of the yoga retreats you've done. Cause, a lot of us have that experience of like, hey, this hour has been incredible. What would it be like if we turned it into an entire
Yeah.
week and then we pulled you out of your normal habitat and routine and put you into a beautiful, picturesque landscape and scenery where we tried to get
Yeah.
rid of maybe as many distractions as we can, so maybe you can experience that same feeling over the course of a week. So talk to us a little bit about what the yoga retreat experiences have been like for someone leading them, and then what you've seen in some of the students who take part in these trips.
Yeah, so that was a piece of the pie that I was just I really underestimated it. I had no idea how much I would absolutely love to lead yoga retreats. And honestly, I don't want to play favoritism anywhere, but if I'm being fully honest, retreats is my favorite thing. I love my studio. I love my community. I love training people. I love teaching classes. Those are all wonderful. And I wake up every morning excited to go somewhere in the world and watch these people have incredible experiences. And a lot of it has to do, it's interesting. I had someone try and say, "Oh, you shouldn't call it a retreat because the word retreat implies surrendering and it implies that something bad happened and you're like trying to pull away from
Hmm.
it." I'm like, let's talk about how traumatic life is. I kind of absolutely actually would like to retreat from life. I wave the surrender flag. Absolutely. Take me to Costa Rica right now. I retreat. I surrender right now. So, and it's interesting that that concept of
Hmm.
it really is about immersing yourself in a different environment and surrendering. It really is. And everybody can do it. Every retreat experience is different. Every person who goes on the retreat has a different experience. And with my retreat business with Jen, which is Wild Wonder Yoga Retreats and Training, we tell everybody that it is up to them how much they do or do not want to do. They don't have to come to a single yoga practice, and they can also go to every single yoga practice. But it's really about retreating, being away from the everyday grind and all the stimulus that you're constantly around, hopefully shutting that off and surrendering to the process, surrendering to being in another culture. Oftentimes, technology can be challenging when you're on a technology is the worst, just in general. I love it and I hate it. Like we need it, and I'm really happy for it. But at the same time, it is just it causes so much problems, so many problems. But oftentimes, technology connectedness can be challenging, especially if you're on the other side of the world and it's a different time zone, and you're in the middle of the jungle or something. Um, so it's a time where you can surrender that constant stimulation, surrender your constant connectedness to external nonsense, noise, and reconnect with yourself. Oftentimes, reconnect with other people or connect with people that are like minded to you. We, on yoga retreats, we start and end the day with yoga. Sometimes we have something in the middle of the day. We oftentimes also offer meditation in these really beautiful locations. I know you know because you've been there. This beautiful meditations and like I'm thinking of Costa Rica, the Acacia Shala, which is just tucked into the middle of the jungle, and the trees and the plants are growing into the actual yoga environment. You hear birds and howler monkeys and I don't even know the insects like just like buzzing and clicking, and it is just alive. It's teeming with life. And it's so powerful to melt into that and let yourself be cradled by it, really cocooned in that experience. And not everywhere we go is like that, but we do also try and choose places that are natural in some sort of way, so that nature is coming in, because nature is a healing tool that is so overlooked, and so vital to us. It's interesting. We forget that we ourselves are nature, and we go to these retreats. And I at first thought, like, oh, it's for them to disconnect. It's for them to disconnect from their lives, disconnect from the world, disconnect from technology, disconnect from their titles and their roles and their labels and all the things that they have to do. But it's actually about reconnecting. It's actually about truly connecting, that I've learned over the years. And again, everybody can make of it what they wish. It's not about forcing my agenda on anyone. It's just that space that we're offering, and it ends up being what they need it to be. And I'll say this too, even the people who come on a yoga retreat, for example, like a husband and wife come on the yoga retreat, the husband loves yoga, the wife does not. Even the partner or friend or whoever who doesn't do yoga, just getting away is transformational. I There's never been a moment where we've had a retreat experience and they're like, "Well, I don't know what that was for." We get to the end of it, and even the ones who didn't do the yoga were like, "I caught up on some sleep. I got to sit and watch a bird in the tree, and I haven't done that in a long time. I went swimming. I don't know, I connected with a friend. We had a good meal together. It's just everybody has a beautiful experience, and it's magic, and it's so amazing to watch from the teacher perspective. I'm honored that people would trust us to take them some, oftentimes out of the country, but it is just magical to watch. I just couldn't be more excited about watching other people have the transformational experience. This is kind of what for yoga, what I've always wanted back to the beginning, is for everybody to have to experience what I've experienced through the practice. And it's just this beautiful, beautiful transformation.
Yeah, I know I could speak firsthand of how cool it is when you are in a space where it's like, all right, we don't really have to worry about all these other factors because a lot of it is
Yes.
planned for you, from where you're staying to the meals you eat to the yoga practices. Like, it really takes a lot of the stress out of going to explore a brand new country or a brand new area of the world. And you get all the picturesque and beautiful scenery, and then you get the opportunity to just kind of like sit and be with it. And I've had this conversation with others where sometimes you go on a vacation and you get back and you're like, I needed a vacation from the vacation
Exactly.
because it's so like go, 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 go. And this was such a different experience where it's like, oh, we can just hang out and be like this. And you can go adventure and do fun things and soak in all of those memories. And then there's also those moments where you're like, hey, we just get
Yes.
to hang out and just be and breathe and probably do a little bit of resetting to that nervous system with how much the stress response is constantly kicked in. So
Completely.
it is one of the coolest experiences we've had. And we look forward to the next
Yeah.
one. We got to pinpoint the next adventure we want to go on with the retreats over there.
Yeah. Well, we can't wait to have you and Emily come back with us, of course, because it was really great to have that experience and watch you all enjoy that experience. And you're right, I've gone on way too many vacations where it's like, like you said, like I need a vacation from my vacation. But even with the adventure and even with all the things, there's something about the intentionality of a yoga retreat where it is really focused on being present. And not to say that alcohol isn't okay. Like people drink alcohol, it's totally fine, but it's not centered around partying. It's not centered around, okay, everybody meet me at the bar for shots. That does happen. And again, I'm not the gatekeeper for it. I'm not the gatekeeper for any of the yoga experiences, but it's not focused and centered around that. If anything, it's focused and centered around being present and reconnecting and letting yourself have a break for once. And people oftentimes go home feeling very restored. Even as the leader of a yoga retreat, I'll go home feeling so grateful and so inspired. And I mean, yeah, do I want to stay there forever? And is it really hard to go home and do the things? But I'm not like, my body isn't trashed, and I feel rejuvenated and I feel refreshed, and I have a
Mm-hmm.
new lease on life, and I can see things differently. It's just a little bit of space that's so, so, so nice.
Yeah. And there are the big excursions where you're probably going to a different country and most likely staying there for a week. There's also smaller excursions that are more local. And there's some beautiful scenery in the South Carolina,
Yeah.
North Carolina area that you all offer from time to time where you can get sort of a micro
Yes.
expression of a retreat where maybe for a long weekend you could sneak away. So if you're not maybe ready for the big week-long
Exactly.
commitment, but you're like, hey, what is these retreats they're speaking about, and you want to check a local one out, they certainly have those as well, which are really, really
Yeah,
cool.
twice a year we go to North Georgia to a retreat center that's tucked away in a national forest. And well, so far we've been going twice a year, and we're booked through 2025. We have retreats at this place. And yeah, for us, it's from Anderson, about an hour and a half drive. And I think it's equally an hour and a half drive from Atlanta. So it's not crazy. You don't have to fly there. And we usually do Thursday through Sunday. So it's just enough to get in there and get quiet. And we treat the weekend retreats the same that we would a full on international 7-night retreat. We dive in and make this really intentional space immediately. So yeah, come to any of them. They're really, really fun, all of them.
Yeah, so we'll include information on how you can learn more
Thank
about
you.
that. But one of the things that I love asking some of the guests, and I could tell, and from our conversations, you're someone who thinks and feels very deeply. You've explored a lot with yoga practices and the text and understanding it. I'm always curious, what are the principles, values, like guiding lights, if you will, for folks that kind of influence or have a major say in how they interact with the world, how they like to make decisions, how they like to, see themselves and communicate with others. So I'm curious, from your perspective, when you think about that, if there's certain sort of guiding principles, big themes, things like that, that guide and influence the way that you kind of interact and go about in the world.
Yeah, I love these questions. These are great. Um, Interestingly, the roots of yoga start off with morals and ethics. So modern yoga today that we think of, going to a yoga studio, taking a yoga class, you think of moving around, making shapes, stretching, sometimes things that require strength, but a lot of, mobility of your body, flexibility, if you will. Then that is one tiny piece of what yoga is. It begins with morals and ethics, what are called yamas and niyamas. And these are the things that in a yoga in lifestyle, if you will, are things that you focus on doing and not doing. For example, truthfulness. You would focus on being truthful with your words and being truthful to yourself, not lying to yourself. And the number one is actually non-harming, ahimsa. And so you always go back to ahimsa and non-harming. And you can ask yourself questions like, is this harmful to me? Is this harmful to somebody else? Is this harmful to a future version of myself? Is this harmful? You can ask yourself these questions. And that is also, by the way, a present moment check-in, because before can do something, I ask myself these questions like, is that harmful to somebody? Is that truthful? Stealing, non-stealing is another one. Am I stealing somebody's time? Am I stealing somebody's focus and attention? It's not just about, breaking into somebody's house and stealing from them. It can be stealing time. So these are the principles that on a daily basis I think about. And I think I've just studied them enough over the years, and especially as a trainer of yoga teachers now, where I train yoga teachers to actually teach yoga. They feel second nature to me. And I can start to notice things show up. Like if something happens and I'm like, ooh, that is not the best use of my energy. That's called brahmacharya, the sometimes called moderation, but like the right use of energy, right use of your time, right use of your whatever. So these things just like pop up and I start to observe them and notice them. So yamas and niyamas, absolutely, these morals and ethics, the do's and don'ts, they absolutely guide me on a daily basis, a moment by moment basis, oftentimes. And really, more than anything, I think like it's the presence. It's really being awake and aware and
Mm.
fully uploaded into the moment rather than mindless. And don't get me wrong, like I don't get it right. I haven't renounced technology. I'm obviously talking to you on a piece of technology. I got a phone right here. I got AirPods right here. But there has to be a balance of shutting out the distractions and getting quiet. Um, the word yoga itself means union. And that is another thing that guides me all the time, is to remember the collective, our oneness. There's a lot of separateness that causes us to be unkind, be even like straight up hateful and cruel to each other. And it's largely, in my experience anyway, due to seeing separateness. And yoga would say we're not separate. We're actually, it's not even your consciousness and my consciousness. It's actually collective, shared consciousness. And when you see the world like that, the person who flipped you off while you're driving down the road, or cut you off, or the person who said something unkind or gave you a dirty look, what if you could look at them and see the oneness, and see, instead of being villainizing them and they're a bad person and they're this. What if they were having a really bad day? What if they have trauma? It makes me slow down and it makes me consider the experience of the person rather than the reactivity of the emotion. So it's a lot just of presence and slowing down for me. I feel like my whole life I've just been this really big, intense, feeling, exuberant kind of person. I'm very loud. I'm like cheerleader kind of loud. I just started coaching at this other place, and they give you some microphone, and I'm like, I almost don't need this, but I'll take it. It's pretty fun. But like, I'm just this really, really loud, big, feeling, exuberant person, and it's just helped me feel connected to something greater than myself, a form of spirituality. It's helped me feel connected to others. And it reminds me that like the meaning of namaste that we say at the end of a practice is we are all one and the same. We're not separate from each other, that we really are all one and the same. And to remember that within each other, the consciousness that connects us.
I love it. The idea of being more present, the idea of union, oneness, staying connected with everybody, and then managing and just kind of checking in and seeing like, hey, am I living in alignment with some of those values of yoga, of myself, and what does that do for me as a teacher?
Yeah, absolutely.
And so with that, Megan, thanks so much for spending some time with me on the podcast today. I'm so grateful that our paths have crossed. It's funny, I'm sure those who know me, when they hear you speak, are like, is she just saying everything that Brad says all the
Yes.
time? Because I think we have a lot that we share and a lot in common.
I think that's why we connected
So
immediately
I'm
when we
very
were on the
grateful that our paths have
retreats.
crossed. And
We
yes,
just think
100%,
alike. And once you
100%.
see the world that way, it is just you can't unsee it. It's beautiful. It really is. It takes the pressure off of everything. You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to get it all right. You don't have to have it figured out. You just get to show up and observe. I don't know. We're just here to show up and observe. I mean, say that a couple times in your life instead of being really, really upset about something. I'm just here to observe. I mean, it changes your perspective completely. Anyway, thank you. I love being here with
That's
you.
it.
Yeah.
100%. Oh, I love it. I love it. And I love that little tidbit too. Hey, observe. Before you jump in and do something, make some sort of reaction, just observe,
Yes.
see.
Absolutely.
For those that are interested in learning a little bit more about retreats or what you have to offer, what are the best places for them to go learn more about what you're able to
Yeah,
offer?
we have a website for our retreats, and it's www.wildwonder.yoga. So wild wonder, one word, .yoga. And we have all of our retreat offerings organized there for you to see and also register for. And as far as Anderson Yoga Center goes, I have a website there too, andersonyogacenter.com. We both have Instagram profiles. So wild_wonder_yoga is the retreat business that we have. And then my yoga studio is just Anderson Yoga Center, both on Instagram and Facebook. Yeah, so you can follow us there. And especially when we're on retreat, we are posting obnoxiously so that you can see all the beautiful places that we are in the world. But we have a lot of really beautiful stuff coming up. We have in a less than 40 days, we just hit the 39-day mark. We're going to Greece. And then in October, we're going to Peru. January 2025, we're going to Costa Rica. July/August 2025, we're going to Bali. We have 2 back-to-back weeks in Bali. And we are working on 2026 right now. We have registration isn't even open yet, but we have Scotland for early 2026. And then we're kind of going back and forth between South Africa and Thailand for the end of 2026. So yeah, I know. How do I decide? I don't know. All the beautiful places. We'll get there eventually, but you can see all of that on our website at wildwonder.yoga.
Yeah. Awesome. So yeah, definitely go check it out on social media, on the website. can't recommend a better group to lead you on a
Thank
retreat, whether
you.
it's your first one or many retreats. Great chance to see the world and have a chance to connect, be a little bit more present, be a little bit more aware, and they give you a great space for that. So, well, Megan, thanks so
Yes,
much for spending some time with me on the podcast today. Can't wait to catch up again soon with you,
absolutely.
and look forward to hearing all the fun things that you're going to be embarking on over this year and in the
Thank
future.
you so much, Brad. It's been a joy to reconnect with you and to talk and to just really tease out some of these things that are beautiful in life. Thank you.